Today's webinar special topic will be the database as a fundraising tool. Today's webinar will provide an overview of the types of information that can be stored in a nonprofit database, as well as focus on key data every nonprofit should consider tracking and why. This webinar will also provide a brief review of creating a database cleanup plan and tips for selecting the right database for your organization. So the focus is on an overview of CRM or donor databases, information on tracking best practices, database cleanup plan, new database selection processes, and resources available to clubs. So databases, why do we need them? Databases provide a peace of mind to an organization. They provide safe and secure online transaction environments to alleviate common concerns about spam, viruses, and data breaches, while ensuring complete accuracy and transparency. They increase presence and reach through social networking tools for creating personalized web pages, soliciting donation, making it simpler for existing supporters to spread the word. It allows for modern efficiency. It can automate online payment and registration processes. It can also reduce fees associated with processing credit cards and checks. It can reduce a workload, so saving time by automating administrative tasks such as sending out tax documents and donation acknowledgments, as well as filing and categorizing memberships by doing it within the system, or even setting things within your database to produce those tax receipts through the database. Scalability, so it can grow with you, and data collection and analysis. You know, what's the KPI of your donor and fundraising program, retention rates, campaign tracking and analysis. All of these things are really important, and that's why databases can provide that additional support to an organization. Some top qualities of a good donor database system and some things to consider. So if we were to focus on workflow, does your nonprofit database facilitate workflow or create more work for you? A good system is one that makes maintenance easy and allows you to set up communications directly from your donor platform for reminders, instant access to account records, even notes and appointments. If we were to focus on trust as one of the things to consider, is can you trust the information in your CRM system, in your database? Does it still ring true to your organization's initiatives? A lot of times I hear, well, I can't trust what's in the database. I don't know how it got in there, that sort of thing. So some top qualities are trust in that database. Some of that has to do with how you set it up and maintain it, but that's something to consider. Authorization, who manages the database? That's really important to look at. Who's managing my database and overseeing those things that make it an effective fundraising tool. And then value, does your CRM system help you build and maintain relationships? I mean, at the end of the day, you want your database to be able to help you do that, to be a fundraising tool, to help you identify new prospects, new donors, track retention rates, that's big gifts, frequency of giving, all of those different things. Can you do that and look at and analyze your donor file? Is it providing value to your fundraising program? Security, are your records backed up and protected? It's important from a donor point of view, but also from an organizational standpoint, to make sure that all data is backed up, recoverable, and protected from interference and security breaches. Is it PCI compliant? And then support, do you have a dedicated IT person or team, or do you need a reliable third-party service? Some of our organizations have a dedicated IT person, and others use a third-party service through the vendor to provide support. These are some things I hear from the field as to why aren't we using the database as a fundraising tool. Some of the things heard are we don't know what our donor database can really do. A lot of that has to do with training, or if you're new to the organization, the database has been there a while, there may not be anything in terms of history to refer back to is what is what are the services provided from your vendor and so forth. We don't have the manpower to manage it, so it's kind of just starts to just sit there and deteriorate because there's nobody dedicated to it. We're hesitant to invest a portion of our budget. We're doing just fine in Excel. So sometimes you hear that, but if somebody accidentally does something to the Excel file, then you lose all your data. So there's a risk there. We don't know how to enable effective fundraising, how it enables effective fundraising. So haven't seen how a database can actually help you with your fundraising program, data-driven decisions to help you with your pipeline and your fundraising initiatives. So it is possible to do that, and we'll talk through that a little bit more. We don't get a lot of funds from individual donors, just United Way and grants, so we don't understand how we would use it. So those are some of the things that I hear out in the field for why the database isn't being used as a fundraising tool. So it's really important from that perspective to talk about how do I get the most out of my current CRM or database. It's really about assessing it. What donor management system features do you currently have? What data do you think your current system should track that it doesn't? How easy is your system to use? Do you have training and support internally or with the vendor, and are you using it? I find that a lot of times our clubs aren't using the database support that's provided, and knowing how to do that, reaching out to your vendor and getting the support you need. There's a donor management workbook that assesses your needs, and we'll talk more about it, but it's really important, in answering these questions is to also list the features you wish that your database had and list data that you wish you could track to be more effective in your fundraising program, and list things you wish were easier to do in your database. This thing takes 10 steps. I wish it only took 1 or 2. And what are your training needs? List out those training needs. Is that something that can be addressed with your current vendor, or do you have the wrong database? We'll go back to the workbook assessment a little later, but I'm going to focus a little bit now on database tracking best practices. So some things that are really important to track in your database, we're going to go through several slides of this, but the first one is donor information. So what's your donor's name, first, middle, and last? It's really important to have those in separate fields if your database allows it, because it makes it easier to run receipts, to pull data back out, because each of those name fields are separate, so you can sort differently. It allows you to have more freedom with your data through reporting. Title, so what does your donor prefer to use, Miss, Mr., Mrs., Reverend, etc. An informal salutation, that's really important to track. James equals Jim. What's Richard's nickname? Is it Rich, Rick, etc.? A lot of times we make the mistake of putting that in our donor name fields, but then when we do things like run address updates, well screening, a lot of times the nickname won't screen as well because the person's official name is James, not Jim. Then your formal salutation for recognition and official tax receipts, how do they formally want to be recognized or communicated with? And then the source of the record. How did this record get into your database? If it's possible, it's really important to kind of look at that. Where are most of my donors coming from? Are they coming from events, referrals, personal contact, a mass mailing, whatever it might be? In terms of contact information to track, we want to be able to contact our donors, or our donors are our future pipeline for major gift fundraising, planned giving, etc. So we have to have ways to contact them. So it's important to track home phone number, work phone number, email address, and cell phone number if you have it. Your spouse information, so spouse phone number, spouse email, even their assistant's phone number and email if they're an executive and the only way to get to them is their assistant. Those are important things to track because we want to be able to communicate with our donors. Some prospecting information that's really important to track, so you're learning more about who these people are in your database, occupations, employer information, spouse name, and their employer or occupation, an actual or approximated birth date or age. You can even default to decades if you're not sure exactly. Age can sometimes be hard to find. Usually you need a data append for that. If you've gone through a well screening, make sure you're getting that in there because it's really important to be able to pair that information with your giving information to be able to analyze your donors a little closer. If you've learned about their interests or hobbies, they like golf, they like art, they're really into science, whatever it might be, you can start to pair your prospects with some of the funding initiatives that you have going on if you're tracking that in your database. Top charities or philanthropic priorities, so who do they give to outside of your organization? They really love, you know, the the local university sports team, or they really support the symphony, whatever it might be. Those are important things to know. Your board members, their years of participation and roles on the board, that becomes really important for the history of your organization. And the longevity information that you track about your board members and prospects. Event committee participation, that tells you a level of commitment to your organization, and are they an alum? Did they come to the club? In terms of gift processing information, all gift and pledge information is important, so gift amount and gift date. Your funds, are they supporting general operating fund, emergency appeal, scholarships, the building, whatever it might be. Their payment method and type of gift, so are they paying cash, check, credit card, stock, in-kind bequests, what type of gift is this? The appeal, so did this come from the spring mailer? The campaign is an annual campaign, a capital campaign, an endowment. Is this supporting an event? If it's a pledge, making sure you're booking it as a pledge with an installment schedule. And what vehicle did this come in on? What channel? So was this through online, direct mail, a phone call, face-to-face event? That helps you with your ROI of your programs if you're tracking that. And then tracking if acknowledgement or tax receipt has been sent. That's really important to know that has been sent out. Sometimes that's an audit question, so that's really important to be able to know when it happened and how long it took between the gift date and when it was actually receipted. Moves management information. So am I tracking my assigned solicitors? Or do my prospects have an assigned solicitor? The date and summary comments from personal contacts or moves, so your contact reports for visits, letters, phone calls, proposals and asks. So those are really important. If you got in front of a donor and made an ask, how many of those have you made, and what was the result of that? So results and response to phone and face-to-face solicitations. Tracking where your prospects are in the moves management stages. Are they in identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, stewardship? That's really important to kind of know where your prospects are in your relationship building process. And what's the ROI to tracking all of this information? Really what it is it provides you with a 360 view of your donors and their relationships to the organization through this track data. You can pull and review giving history, their level of volunteerism, the contacts that you've had, meetings, phone calls, etc., their interests, and how to tie them to key initiatives that you have going on. It allows you to trace the longevity of the relationship. If you're tracking gift history and they've given 50 gifts over the last 10 years, and they've volunteered in the event committee, and they have an interest in golf and STEM and blah, blah, blah. That tells you a lot about them and how long they've been in your file and what is their lifetime value. You can really see that. If you're tracking this level of information, then you can see the lifetime value of your donor. Next thing we're going to focus on is really about your data and having a clean database. So it's really important to get a data quality assessment of your donor data and determine the extent of your immediate data quality problems. You can do this yourself through a series of queries looking at missing addresses, running a duplicate assessment of your file. Most databases allow you to kind of run some kind of duplicate report. You can run queries on missing phone numbers, email, etc. But if you do an audit of that, you can kind of see where are your data quality problems. If you document your data needs, you can figure out what data is required to execute your fundraising strategies. This becomes really important when you start addressing marketing segments and targeting messaging to key prospects. Do you have what you need to be successful? And if not, then it's important to determine your data gaps. What data do you need but are not currently collecting? Maybe emails, phone numbers, age, whatever it might be. It's really important to kind of audit and assess that. And the next step in that would be to prioritize your identified issues, determine what can be handled internally in terms of cleanup or what might need to be sent to a vendor service. It's really important to assign cleanup tasks to key stakeholders with due dates and manage the timeline and deliverables. If you're not project managing this and holding each other accountable for your committed due dates, then the database will never get clean. So it's really important, whatever issues you've identified, the things you choose to do internally, it's really important to hold each other accountable and sign those dates and timelines and deliverables. And even when you're using a vendor, really holding the vendor accountable too, so that you're meeting your deadlines so that you can get your data clean and move forward. In terms of a new CRM or database, what are some of the best practices for looking for a new database? That's a question we get a lot, and there's some tools that can help with that. So there's a great workbook. We have it out on bgca.net. It's a workbook called Do I Need a New Donor Management System? And it's a step-by-step decision-making workbook. And so I'm going to give you some highlights from it that I find very helpful. So there's a segment in there called Where Are You Now? And it's important to list your top fundraising priorities and activities for your current fiscal year. And then what are the top 10 things you need from your system for your system to do to support these priorities? So it's really important to kind of answer those questions. And then it's important to talk about where you're going in terms of what new special events or strategies will be essential to your fundraising program, capital campaign, or gala. How will these changes affect how you manage your donors, if at all? And list the top 5 additional things you'll need your system to do based on your new fundraising strategy. Talking about what donor management features do you need, what donor management features do you currently have. This workbook guides you through all of the different phases of this, and it's a really great tool to kind of really get at, do I need a new database system, or is it just that I'm not using my current system effectively? And the workbook's really designed to kind of walk you through that. And maybe you're not tracking the data that you may find through this assessment, that you're not tracking the data that you need, but your current database actually can do that. So it's really important to kind of use this tool to assess that. And then once you make a decision to go with a new database, it's really important to have a data implementation plan. A lot of times we don't have a data implementation plan and we rely on the vendor, and our data goes from one database into another, but there's no plan for how we really want to use our data moving forward. And so, and nothing's been cleaned up, so we've inherited the same problem again. So there's some tough decisions to be made when you're implementing data, and a good vendor will walk you through this process. And if they're not, this is a good slide to reference to make sure that your vendor is going to commit to these things and help you through these decision processes. So you must have data governance policies in place before you migrate your data. And what I mean by that is if you don't have standards for data quality, and your organization isn't committed to maintaining those standards, then you're going to have the same problem with your data. So if your data currently, there's no standards for how you put in an address, a name, and everyone puts it in differently, moving forward, and that's a frustration, then moving forward, you're going to have that same problem unless you kind of set, moving forward, all addresses will be spelled out. We will use formal names, nicknames will go in an informal salutation, so on and so forth. So it's really important to kind of look at that as you're building out your data implementation plan. What will all data standard practices be? Your second decision is, how many years of data do I want to migrate in there? And that's really up to each organization. Some, migrate at all. Some do, 10 years because they want to, look at trending. Some it's 5. And then what will you do with retired data? So that you don't lose that information. If you don't, there's pluses and minuses to all of those different decisions, but if you have long-term donors and you only, you know, roll in a certain amount, then you're going to miss a significant part of your donor history. So it's really important to think through that process. And then what do you do about lapsed donors? Some people want to just remove lapsed donors from their file. But sometimes you lose the history that you need. Some people look at their lapsed donors and create a reach out plan to see if they can, revitalize them through new messaging and see if they can retain them. But it really depends on how long lapsed they are. But if you need them for IRS purposes, for history and that sort of thing, then you may need to keep them all on your file. But it's really important to kind of talk through what you need and, do you want to put them in there or do you want to mark them as old or retired and so that, or inactive, so they get migrated over into your new database, but they're marked as inactive because you don't want to keep pulling them into mailings because they're non-responsive, but you need them for history purposes. Another question to ask and to think about in a decision is, what do I do with data that doesn't import? This happens to every organization. When you're trying to import old data, sometimes it's corrupt or there's errors in it that it won't come over easily. So, there's decisions to be made about, do I fix it and clean it in order to keep it? Do I remove it completely? What if it affects my VIP or top donors? Then, I may have to go manually and fix whatever the issue is in order to get it into my new database. And most vendors will walk you through this process as well. You may have a couple of ad hoc fields with a lot of donor history notes in them. So what do you do with them? Because a lot of times those won't translate into your new database easily. So one of the recommendations would be to export this data into a spreadsheet and review it and see if it has meaningful data or if it's just a way you've been maintaining data because your old database wouldn't do what you needed. So if you find value in it, then it's important to import into your new database and find a field that will translate effectively in order to pull that. Another question that comes up a lot is, should we clean our data before or after the migration? The recommendation is before, because then you're starting your database with a clean slate. So if you don't clean your data and you import it into your new database, you're starting off a new database with bad data. But if you clean it beforehand, then you have the opportunity to get your data in the right place before you get it into your new database. And then another question to think about and decision to make is, we chose a new CRM database. We're 3 months into our process and we're just figuring out that some of the data fields won't translate to the new database. What do we do now? So you've created a data map with your vendor of all these old fields now translate into these new fields, but you have a section of old fields from your old database that don't translate easily or fit into the new database. So it's important to look at it and say, can you remap to another field? Do you create a custom field for the database? But the real issue is that the old database is suffering from bad data that the new database might not tolerate. So this is how we used to do things, but the new database is saying, well, that's not the best way to do it. So do you keep it? Do you create a custom field? What do you do? But it's really important to kind of step back and see, is this data really important, or is it just a bad practice we've had, and now we're trying to translate that bad practice into our new database? What is the story behind it? And if it's valid and it's important, then you would create a custom field to map it in order to keep it. But if it's stuff that it's just the way we've always done it, is kind of your answer, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to do it moving forward. So really kind of stepping back and thinking about, what you're trying to do, because your new database is really all about the future and what you're trying to gain moving forward. You're not trying to recreate the same database in a new form, you're really trying to create a future with a database tool that will allow you to do all those things that you said you wanted to do in your assessment. So it's really important to kind of step back and go, why are we trying to do the same thing in a new database when we really wanted to gain some new advantages to moving to a new database? So kind of stepping back from, well, this is the way we've always done it, and into, well, this is our future, and this is what we really want to be able to achieve moving forward. Another thing that comes up is your database will sometimes have software updates. A lot of times our clubs are hosted on third parties, vendor sites, so the software updates happen sometimes without your knowledge because they're just doing it behind the scenes, but occasionally a software update can affect your business processes. So it's really important to look at software updates and what do they mean. So a lot of times what happens when your donor database has a software update is they'll push the release notices to their customers and share important changes about what will happen in the next version. Anybody who's a Razor's Edge user who went from a 7 point something version to an 8, a lot of their fields changed, and it changed reports. And I know some nonprofits who they couldn't run their reports because the update went ahead without any kind of testing plan, and then they were stopped in their tracks. So it's really important to kind of see when that release comes out for your upgrade, is it going to change any of your business processes, or will it affect your business day-to-day work? So it's really crucial to review that to make sure it's not going to hinder your day-to-day operations. Before your IT or database support or vendor support person upgrades your database, it really is a best practice to build a testing plan and implement it. There's one that we built and put on bgca.net. It's a software upgrade tool and white paper. So there's a worksheet that you can kind of assign different tasks to for people to kind of test the upgrade in a sandbox or a testing environment to make sure that with these upgrades, it's not going to affect your database. Sometimes they change or alter key software features that affect standard reports and operation protocols. So it really is important to have a testing plan. By testing your database software before it goes into your live database, you can identify potential risks to day-to-day operations before the upgrade is performed. This allows the organization to implement any necessary data processing or report changes before the upgrade occurs. And implementing a testing plan can also help you prevent excessive downtime due to these unforeseen changes in your database. I know that with the Razor's Edge upgrades, when they changed where phone number and email and those types of things were, I know one nonprofit that got shut down for a week because all the reports were different and they weren't prepared for it. So it really is important to do this. The testing plan template that's out on bgca.net is really designed to guide your end users and your database administrator through a database software upgrade test. So it is available. There's instructions for it. I would encourage anybody who's kind of run across this or has a worry about that to go out to bgca.net and really look at that testing template. And finally, just some key things to remember. Major gift fundraising combines a realistic development plan with appropriate staff and the financial and technical resources to help you achieve that. So both are important. Selecting a donor database combines clear goals and a realistic budget, a solid selection process, proper attention during the conversion, so that implementation plan from the old database to the new one, and good staff training and ongoing support. This approach will allow you to choose the software that will support your organization's long-term goals. And just some final thoughts before we end today. There are a number of donor management systems on the market. Choosing the right one is critical, but so is remembering that the tool itself is only half the story. The other half lies in understanding what you need and then following through on that. Sophisticated fundraising combines a realistic development plan and appropriate staff and all of the things on this slide to really achieve your fundraising goals. I hope this webinar was helpful to you today. It'll be posted on bgca.net along with the presentation and handouts such as the assessment workbook and testing plan. Thank you.